From CGTN headquarters in Beijing, this is The Hub with Wang Guan.
Hello and welcome to The Hub on CGTN. I'm Wang Guan in Beijing. 3 million. That is the number of refugees from Ukraine, according to the United Nations Refugee Agency. And among them, 90% are women and children. And the plight of many of these refugees is heart-wrenching. To get a sense of the unfolding humanitarian crisis in Ukraine, I'm joined by Chris Melzer, the spokesperson for the United Nations High Commissioner for Refugees. Chris, thank you so much for doing this. First of all, can you give our audience a sense of the scope of the humanitarian crisis unfolding and also the life of a refugee, which to many of our average viewers can be difficult to imagine?
It is difficult to imagine even for the people who are right now refugees. So many told me, we have never expected that we need to leave our home because there are bombs and grenades and other things. So it is terrible to be a refugee, to lose everything. Then you have to flee. Then you have probably have your loved ones. You have to leave them behind. Right now, the situation is that 3.2 million refugees are outside of Ukraine, and there are another 2 million people who fled inside the country, so are internally displaced persons. And this in only 3 weeks. So the conflict started to this day 3 weeks ago, and we have already about 5 million people who had to flee their homes. Wow,
that is a lot. Considering the population of Ukraine.
Yes, so 1 out of 8 Ukrainians is now a displaced person in the country or outside of the country. And we are afraid that the figure is still rising. Not that much anymore like in the first 2 weeks, but day by day it's another 150,000 people who are fleeing Ukraine. Our estimate was up to 4 million, and I'm afraid this is a very plausible figure.
Right. Chris, there are so many needs of a refugee, right? In the short run, I suppose it would be food, water, shelter, personal hygiene, and health. But in the medium to long run, many of them face an uncertain future as to whom to go to or which country to call home again. How are the UNHCR cater to the various needs of these refugees?
Well, in the host countries like Poland or Romania, we are not, how we call it, operational. So this is the matter of these countries, of the Polish government or the Romanian governments. We are focusing on our work in Ukraine. But what we see in Poland, of course, we are there also present, and we try to help. UNHCR has the experience of more than 70 years working in 135 countries. We offer this experience to cope with this situation here. But what these countries are doing, the governments and especially the very ordinary people doing extraordinary things, this is just amazing. So the solidarity warms my heart every day.
But what are some of the practical challenges on the ground when the agency is trying to help out and trying to cater to the needs of these refugees?
Well, let's take the Ukraine as an example. We are still there and we will not leave. We have about 120 people working there for UNHCR, men and women doing 20-hour shifts every day. And what they're doing is that they distribute relief items like sleeping bags, mattresses, diapers, and similar things. But we are also looking for some places to stay. So when we find a school or a sporting hall, that we put 100 or 150 field beds in that, so that people who had to leave home could stay there for a while. And yes, also we try to negotiate these humanitarian corridors so that our help can go in and the people can go out.
Chris, in a reception center in the Polish border town of Medyka, you said you met one of the youngest refugees who is, this pains me to say this, who is only 2 months old. His name is Andriy. Can you tell us a bit about his story?
Yes, I met Andriy 2 weeks ago with his aunt and his mother, and they had to flee when he was only 6 weeks old, actually, really a tiny baby, who of course have no idea what this means to be a refugee. and the father had to stay behind in Kharkiv, in the city. The baby is now indeed in Poland, is safe with his mother and his aunt. But of course, the mother and the aunt, they are desperate because the little baby was a sign of hope, and now it's also a symbol of being a refugee, and they wishing nothing more than just that they can just return in a safe country.
Is there, a secure line of communication with the father back home? Is there any word on when the son, the kid, and the father can meet again?
Well, there is a kind of communication because they are using internet, of course, sending photos, sending videos, or doing video calls or something like that. But no one really knows at what point the refugees can go home. This is, by the way, one of the two sentences I've heard every day on the border. It was really the question, what do you think, when can we go home? We cannot answer this question. We wish that the refugees can go home very soon. I wouldn't mind if I would be unemployed, but we just can't answer this question. The other sentence I've heard most, by the way, was from the children asking me very often, or telling me very often, I miss Daddy so much.
Yeah, it breaks my heart. It breaks the hearts of many to hear this and to know this. But let's move on and talk about what we can do. Russia said it established humanitarian corridors. Many sides called on Russia to honor this promise. Ukraine's Deputy Prime Minister also said that at least 9 humanitarian corridors were open, with 150 civilians escaping areas like Mariupol, Kyiv, and Sumy. How is the UNHCR working with the belligerents to guarantee a safe passage?
We are only one part of the team. So United Nations is doing this with OCHA, for example, the Office of the Humanitarian Coordinator. But we are always a part of this team to negotiate this kind of secure pathways. We really need these humanitarian corridors, as I already said, not only to take the people out into safety, but also to bring our help in. For example, every day our trucks, our convoys going from Poland to Ukraine to help the displaced people, or the people in need there. And the estimate of the United Nations is that 12 million people, so more than 25% of the Ukrainians need assistance, need help, and we try to provide that.
Chris, many predicted that this would be a decisive battle, but it looks like this could be a war of attrition, if you will. That means this war can go on and on. Is the agency prepared for this eventuality? What concrete measures have been put in place in Ukraine and across the borders?
Yeah, we have our experience of so many decades, of so many countries, but of course you can't really be prepared for this. Although we did a lot, for example, our stockpiles in Ukraine, where we put a lot of more in our warehouses there, especially the relief items we need most, like blankets, sleeping bags, and so on. Our staff is still there. No one of them has left. And we have our contingency plans to help these refugees as good as we to help the people in Ukraine and also the refugees outside of the country as good as we can. But as you have mentioned, the time is really a factor here. So if this situation goes on and on and on, and the war goes probably for many months, then it will be a much bigger challenge compared to right now.
Is this something you've seen before?
It depends. I'm part of the emergency response team of UNHCR, so we have to be sometimes within 72 hours all over the world. And I was, for example, in Bangladesh. Kutupalong is the biggest refugee camp in the world. I was in Ethiopia, for example, and the similar pictures. Families trying to seek safety, trying to rescue their children. And the same pictures we have right now in Ukraine. What is different for me is this is just right next door for me now. I'm from Germany, so this goes on the border between Poland and Ukraine, and also the pace of the situation is so much faster. But on the other hand, it's unfortunately a picture I know very well, and this is depressing.
So according to UNHCR, its mandate is to provide on a non-political and humanitarian basis international protection to refugees and to seek permanent solutions for them. So in the case of Ukraine, what is the single biggest challenge for your agency to uphold that mandate?
Well, since we're working in Ukraine, I think the biggest problem is right now that we have to work with only a few people. Again, no one have left, but it's only 120 people working there in a very big country with millions of people who would need, and we are still underfunded. So we had a flash appeal last week asking for $1.7 billion. Sounds like a lot of money, but it's actually not much if you see the scale of the whole situation. And that's why we really hope for more support from the international community. This is not a Ukrainian crisis and not a Ukrainian-Polish crisis. This is actually a worldwide crisis, and that's why we are so grateful for the international solidarity.
Chris, the mandate of the agency includes advocating for national or multilateral policies on behalf of these refugees. Through our camera, what would your message be to national governments on behalf of these refugees tonight?
I would say thank you very much for your support. We received so many support from governments, also from the private sector, already $200 million. Thank you so much. We really need this to support the people, but actually, this is not enough yet. The scale of the whole situation is so big that we really need international solidarity. But actually, I'm quite confident that this solidarity will be there. We see signs that there's help all over the place, all over the world, and that lifts us up with UNHCR, that we are confident that we can help these people.
Chris Melzer, spokesperson for the United Nations High Commissioner for Refugees, thank you so much for joining us, and thank you for all of your work. Now you're watching The Hub. Coming up next is the issue of space missions with Russia clashing with the West. Will space cooperation turn into space confrontation? Stay tuned. Welcome back. This is The Hub. Half a century ago, space exploration reached a milestone. Soviet cosmonaut Yuri Gagarin became the first man to orbit in space. Interestingly, his spaceship was designed by none other than an Ukrainian scientist by the name of Sergei Korolev. But today, international space cooperation is at a very sorry state of affairs, and the Ukraine crisis could make it worse. Russian space agency Roscosmos has said it will not sell rocket engines anymore to the U.S. for its sanctioning on Russia. And now the European Space Agency has suspended its much-awaited Mars mission with Moscow. So is space diplomacy headed for a crash? For more on this topic, let's see what the experts have to say. Amitabha Gosh is the chair of the Science Operations Working Group at NASA Mars Exploration Rover mission. He's speaking to us from Washington, D.C. Welcome, sir. And also in Beijing, we have Mr. Xu Yansong, Director General at Asia Pacific Space Cooperation Organization. Welcome back, Mr. Xu. Let me start with you, Dr. Gosh, if I may. Dmitry Rogozin, head of the Roscosmos, said this on Russian state television on March 3rd, and I quote, "In a situation like this, we cannot supply the United States with our world's best rocket engines. Let them fly on something else. They're broomsticks." Sir, what would be your response to his remarks?
Well, thank you for having me on the program. Yes, indeed, what you said is right. We are at a very important crossroads. So all views that I'm presenting are personal, and we all do hope that these hostilities and the war would end and things would not have to go this way. To answer your question, fly on broomsticks, I think what he meant is he's going to stop, Russia plans to stop supplying rocket engines. Well, that of course will affect somewhat the US, but on the ballpark, everything will be fine because SpaceX does not use Russian engines. They use their own engines, which is Raptor and Merlin. And United Launch Alliance, the other provider, was anyway trying to transition to Amazon or Blue Origin engines, which is the Vulcan engines. So I think although there will be some maybe near-term effects for ULA, but they're saying that they already have some rocket engines right now. So there will not be a huge effect.
So you're saying that should Russia cut off its supply to America's NASA's space missions, the impact would be minimal?
I think the impact will be minimal at this stage. See, SpaceX is already using its own Merlin rocket engines for Falcon 9. For the spaceship, they're using Raptors, so that would continue, and then ULA will transition to Vulcan after using the last rocket engines. But we don't want this to happen, really. We want all the war to end and everything to come back to normal again.
Yeah, Director Xu, let me turn to you, if I may. Russia has also pulled out personnel from French Guiana, which means the European Union cannot use Russian launchers. And also on the European continent, the German Aerospace Center has halted all projects with Russia. Also, the British satellite company OneWeb has also stopped launches from Russian facilities in Kazakhstan. How do you think all this will impact the space industry going forward? And how should countries really face all these massive disruptions?
Well, I think the Russians have been cooperating with European Space Agency on in French Guiana using the Russian Soyuz rocket, or they modified that into a Starseam rocket to provide commercial launch services. However, the Europeans do have their own launchers, starting from Ariane 4 to Ariane 5, and also their solid boosters. And Ariane 6 is on the stage, is due to be launched this year or next year. So there are plenty of launching capabilities that can be used by European Space Agency to continue their space activity. And in addition to that, you also mentioned about OneWeb and DLR, and their cooperation with Russia is halted because of the political issue. We certainly hope that this war can end very quickly, and then the space community can work together very soon. However, at this stage, I do not see any effects besides the Mars mission. There are not much effects to the European space activity at this moment.
Well, gosh, should the Ukraine crisis get worse before it gets better, and should there be even more disruptions to international space cooperation? Do you think NASA and Europe can somehow work together to fill the vacuum left by Russia?
Absolutely, I think it is absolutely possible, and NASA, for example, on a standalone basis, does not have much collaborations on the Mars frontier with the Russians. So the NASA's next step is to get a sample back from Mars. And as per my understanding, Roscosmos, or the Russian Space Agency, is not in the critical path. The other part of the American plan is SpaceX. SpaceX is trying to send a Mars mission. And if you were following Elon Musk's Twitter page, he seemed to indicate that this is going to be 2029. So that's an independent trajectory. The US Space Agency, NASA, has no plans as of now to send a human mission to Mars. But SpaceX and Elon Musk, they have a vision that by the end of the decade, they want to send humans to Mars. But Roscosmos is not anywhere in the equations here.
Right. Director Xu, how do you see the role of China in the evolving geopolitical and potentially scientific equation? I mean, China worked very closely with both Russia and the EU in space, right? Its space cooperation with Russia goes way back, and China's double star satellites, for example, in 2003 and 2004 have 8 scientific instruments from the EU, and you know this better than I do. How do you think China's efforts been impacted?
Well, I think China will continue its cooperation with the European Space Agency and other European countries. We are not affected at this moment for cooperation with Russia at this moment. And we're continuing our activity as we have promised with all countries. In this current stage, I do think that Russia has some difficulties in continuing their space activity, but I certainly hope that this will end very quickly. And China will continue its Mars and lunar missions, and including a cooperation initiative by the Lunar Office of CNSA, China National Space Administration, to establish a lunar base, science lunar base that is going to be in collaboration with Russia and Europeans and America.
So basically, you're saying that China's efforts, China's cooperation with Russia, and also China's largely independent mission to Mars potentially will not be impacted by the geopolitics going on right now?
Well, I think as you see that we had a very intensive decade of lunar explorations, starting from Chang'e 1 all the way to Chang'e 5, which is a sample return mission, and we will continue that effort by Chang'e 6. All of these are in the independent, sovereign Chinese missions. These are not international cooperation missions. So we will continue to do that. And also we had a successful Mars mission last year, with a lander and a rover, as well as an orbiter, which is still functioning and in orbit and on the Mars surface. And we will continue our mission as Amitabha Gosh has mentioned, that we will have also a Chinese Mars sample return mission. But we do not have a near future manned mission to Moon and Mars at this moment. But we will continue that robotic missions and exploration projects. Even though we have cooperation intentions with Russia on the Lunar 26 and 27, but those are what we call inter-system cooperation. They are independently conducted, and we are only cooperating on scientific objectives.
All right, thank you for these clarifications. Dr. Gosh, let me go back to you. On March the 17th, the European Space Agency said it was suspending a joint mission with Russia known as the ExoMars mission. Its mission was to land a rover on Mars and look for signs of life. David Parker, European Space Agency's Human and Robotic Exploration Director, called this decision, quote, an agonizing decision. Let's take a listen.
There are literally hundreds of scientists and engineers across Europe, the United States, and yes, Russia, who have worked tirelessly to overcome the technical challenges, the programmatic challenges, and the different cultures to get to the point where we have a spacecraft that would be ready to launch. Mars is 4.5 billion years old, so we just have to wait a few more years for it to reveal all of its secret.
Mr. Gosh, do you share his sentiment? How do you feel about all this?
Well, of course, this is unfortunate. As you said, thousands of scientists have worked on this, but what can you do? This is the reality on the ground. And to this last comment, where he says that Mars has to wait, well, there are the Americans who are. The NASA is exploring Mars, as is China, as is United Arab Emirates and India. So science is still going forward. It's just that one mission, the ExoMars, is going to be reversed, and it is unfortunate.
Right. NASA also said it will give full support to the Europeans on its mission to the Mars, giving full support to European Space Agency. NASA also plans human missions to Mars in the 2030s potentially. So, Dr. Gosh, what kind of cooperation do you foresee on Mars?
Well, there will be different countries. With the advent of cheaper and more reliable space travel, different countries are coming into the front. So, as I said, there will obviously be NASA, and then there'll be China, and then there'll be other new countries, like I mentioned, India and United Arab Emirates. So it will be a vigorous decade of discovery. There will be samples back from Mars. We'll have a much better idea whether Mars hosted life or not. From the radar experiments, we will have ideas of whether there's water below the ground. Then the present mission, Perseverance, the Perseverance rover, produced oxygen on Mars. And so this is going to help future missions as well as human missions, so that human beings don't have to carry oxygen from Earth to Mars. So I think there is a vigorous Mars program. There will be some cooperation, and then otherwise space agencies will have their own independent trajectory to explore this fascinating planet.
Right. Director Xu, the other big question is the International Space Station. Russia has a substantial role there. It provides technology, equipment, manpower, money, and among other things. Will Russia now pull out of the station potentially, in your opinion, from the perspective of scientists? Before I do, I want to show our audience this very video posted by Roscosmos. Yeah, there you go. That is the space station, a video posted by Roscosmos, Russia's space agency. So, Director Xu, What do you think?
Well, I think the Russian module has always been playing a key role in maintaining the orbit. You know, the International Space Station, same as many other space objects, decays its orbit with the aerospace drag, the atmospheric drag. So the Russian mission is to maintain and provide propulsion to the International Space Station so that the station can maintain its orbit and altitude. And also, the Russian module also received power and power supplies from the solar panels from the other segment, from the U.S. segment and other international segment. And as you see, that the International Space Station is a space community without border. So every nation, all of these participating dozens of countries are free to join this station and use the station. But the station is also designed to be completed by 2024, and there's also a possibility of extending and commercializing the station. So as of this moment, Russia cannot leave the station, and the station cannot leave Russia, and it's it's an integral part, and needs to be intentionally separated. So I think the station needs to stay together, and the Russians should not leave.
Dr. Gosh, what do you think?
Well, I think it will be very unfortunate if Russia was to leave this collaboration. This is a very old project. I think it started in the 90s, and it has weathered many geopolitical ups and downs. So through everything, all ups and downs, the collaboration on the International Space Station has stayed the same. And so I think the thinking is that, well, maybe this thing will die down and then things will be normal again. But if Russia was to really get out of this collaboration, then, well, it's going to be not easy. I don't know whether it would be feasible.
Yeah, Dr. Xu, as a scientist, how do you feel about geopolitics time and time again get in the way or stand in the way of scientific cooperation?
Well, I just want to mention one thing. There was a couple of decades ago, there was a cooperation called Sea Launch. It was a cooperation between Europeans, US, and Ukraine. Ukraine provided a launch vehicle. Ukraine is very advanced in space, and there are many leftovers from the CCP. So Ukraine was using that launch vehicle technologies to facilitate the sea launch, that you can use a space platform to launch anywhere in the ocean. So I think it's very unfortunate that the geopolitical affects the space sector.
Alrighty, we'll have to leave it there. Dr. Gosh and Director Xu, thank you both so very much for joining us at this hour, and thank you, our viewers, for tuning in. I'm Wang Guan in Beijing. Thank you for watching The Hub on CGTN. Our news coverage continues. Bye and take care.